Chaynu Avinu Kulanu Kiyachad Kulavanu Kiyachad B'Oy Panecha Chaynu Avinu Kulanu Kiyachad Kulanu Kiyachad B'Oy Panecha Chaynu Avinu Kulanu Kiyachad Kulanu Kiyachad B'Oy Panecha Chaynu Avinu Kulanu Kiyachad Kulanu Kiyachad B'Oy Panecha Dididan Lai 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 Dididan Lai Bam bim bam diridan lai diridan diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai lai diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai lai diridan bam bam bim bam 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 bim bam bim bam bim bam bam bim bam bim bam lai 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 diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai diridan lai 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 diridan. So we were learning that here when you're making progress, right? The path of progress has falls on it along the way. But falling along the way doesn't mean that you really crash necessarily. Just the very nature of progress is that you've got to lift one foot to get to the foot after foot to get from step to step, from between one step and the other step, between one rung and the other rung. You're giving up a certain degree of stability. You get to the next level, and that is considered like a fall. As long as you're moving, you don't really crash down, right? And so it's only considered to the stability that you had before, because you're not at the next step yet. Sheva Yipol Tzaddik become, that the Tzaddik falls 7 times and he gets up. It doesn't mean that he fell and did a transgression, but rather he gave up stability to make progress. And Shafal Pikain, that nevertheless, on page 27, the second paragraph there, and in the orange edition, it's on page 28. Shafal Pikain, hu lemala mikol ha'adam ba'avodato, because the tzaddik is still, even though right now he's in some kind of transition state and it's considered like he's falling, he's still higher than the other people, ba'avodato, in his service of God. Because there stays with him an impression of his previous level. Rishimu is an impression. Ba'amreinu shadam gadol higia toch kedei hitkabnato v'shichacha. When we said that The example that was given yesterday was that a great person is learning a tremendous amount of material, and it's natural that he's going to forget some. So when we say that, that within the process of his progress, he also forgets. And we said that means that he sort of lost some of the previous madriga that he was at. That's not considered to be complete. This forgetting is not considered to be a complete loss, that he's lost it completely, because he's going to explain. What's lost at the moment is his ability to access that information immediately. In other words, it's not on the tip of his tongue. It's not in his fingers. It's not in his hand right now. But he's not actually erasing these things from within his psyche. In other words, you learned something. Yeah, you learned something. And I ask you a question about what you learned, right? And you say, I don't remember right now. Half an hour later, you come back and you say, I remember, right? How come you remembered now if you didn't remember half an hour before? Because that information that I asked you about is actually imprinted in your mind. You're just not able to access it right now, but it's there. It's like, like with names. I used to remember names like crazy. And now, somebody tells me a name and it's like 2 minutes later, like, what? I don't, you know what I mean? But so I learn things, and then the next day I go back to try to find it, and it's not so simple. But it's not that it's not there. There is a reshimu. There is an imprint of that. It's been registered. It's just a matter of accessing it.
And I forget what this is called falling.
So it's considered like a fall. It's considered like a fall, but it's not a real fall. You understand? Okay. This is just an example. Somebody who put a lot of effort in. You have the place? Yeah? It's in the 5th line or the 6th line of the paragraph. Somebody who put his effort in and reached a certain level. Even at the time that he's not on that level, he doesn't lose it completely. The impression is still there. It stays there. The imprint that remains in his psyche. The image that these things have created within his psyche. And that doesn't get erased. I once heard Rabbi Leibel Wolf talking about this, from what they know about how the brain works. There's a lot of new information about how the brain works. So I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but basically when you learn something, it makes an actual physical change in the brain. You know that? Now, it can be changed. In other words, let's say you learn something and then you find out, that was wrong. You thought that this information was right, and you find out that no, it was wrong. You understand? So you don't necessarily erase the wrong information. You sort of like you correct it, and it changes the impression in the brain. Okay? So similar to this idea, you find the teaching among the rabbis, where they say in the Gemara, Hizaharu b'zakein, be careful with the covet of an elderly person. We're not talking about you.
You keep telling me I'm not an elderly.
You're the youngest student here, Baruch Hashem. But we are talking about you because over here we're talking about the Talmid Chacham. Hizaharu b'zakein, Talmid Chacham, sheshachach talmudo mipnei anso. An older person that Talmid Chacham, he's forgotten his learning because of some accident, chas v'sholom. Sha'af she'eno ka'ed Talmid Chacham, so that even though right now he's not a Talmid Chacham, yesh lechabdo ala Torah shayta bo. You still have to give him coverage for the Torah that he once possessed. The Amrinan, and this is a quote from the Gemara, we say, Luchot v'shivrei luchot munachot ba'aron. In the Oren Kodesh, you had the second set of luchot, the complete luchot, and we also had the broken luchot in the Aron HaKodesh. Shigam luchot harishonim, that even the first luchot, av shehem shvurim ka'et, even though right now they're broken, ein lizalzel b'kedushatam, you're not allowed to be disrespectful of their holiness. You're not allowed to cheapen their holiness. You're not allowed to say, "Oh, it's broken. It doesn't need any more. We can throw it out." No, you can't. And the reason is, somebody who was a Talmid Chacham, it's not possible that his learning didn't make some kind of an imprint, that it didn't change the structure of his psyche in some way. I don't know if you ever saw this, but I remember once. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to go visit Shabbos afternoon. I used to go visit in the hospital in Montreal. And I go into, just to say good Shabbos to people. So, it happened to be that one of my co-teachers, her father was in the hospital. And he was a Holocaust survivor. It's a good story, Michal. And it's like Shalosh Shudas time. And this man had like a relative in the city that I knew, a Yid with a Streimel and everything, Chassidish Yid. And this man had lived in Israel for a number of years, and then he came to live in Montreal. I don't know why. And but he was clean shaven, and he looks at me. He was very sick, and he says to me, "Plukte charifte, plukte charifte." You know what those words mean? Plukte, argument, charifte, a sharp argument. And what he was referring to was that what went on after the Holocaust, and even before, was a very sharp argument as to which way to go with your Yiddishkeit practice. And knowing his relative, I knew that this Yid himself used to wear a Streimel before the war and so on. Anyway, I didn't know what to say to him, and it was Shalashuda's time. So I said, maybe we can sing some Zmiras. Shabbos afternoon, I started singing, and he started crying. He started crying like crazy. One of his children, they were adults, came into the room and he saw his father crying. He ran to get his brother and his sister, and they came in and they were like, they couldn't believe it. They hadn't seen their father crying in 40 years. Okay, so what happened there? The singing triggered a memory that he hadn't thought about in years, in decades. Understand? But it was there. Understand? It just needed something to trigger it. Once when I was visiting Judy's father all of a sudden, and he was talking, he was suffering from dementia, and he was talking incoherently and everything and so on. As soon as he started singing in a song, he sang the song perfectly without any mistakes and so on. You understand? So there's different parts of the brain and so on, but basically whatever you learn is imprinted on your brain. It might take, you must know the scratch and smell books. You know what the scratch and smell books are? How come you know? They didn't use them in our time.
Yes, they did.
For you or for your kids?
I'm older than you. Yes, I remember in my day. Yes.
In my, I didn't see a scratch and smell until my kids. Anyway, so what was the idea behind the scratch and the smell books? It was that, that you associate the smell with what you're learning, right? And it makes you remember, it helps you remember. So this guy came into an exam with all these different bottles of different fragrances, and they said, you're cheating. He brought in these different things, these smells, to help him remember. So the guy said it's like crib notes. Anyway, so the brain is a very, very interesting thing. So what he's saying over here is that even if somebody Talmud Chacham and an accident happened and he doesn't remember anything, the information is still there. He's lost his ability to access it, and therefore you still have to give him coverage. Just like you put the broken luchas into the Aron HaKodesh together with the whole luchas. Even though right now he doesn't know what he learned and he doesn't remember. But the impression of those things is still there. Likewise, Adam the person who was on a certain level, even if he fell from his madrega, even if he fell from that level, he's still above another person that never got to this level at all. So when it says that the tzaddik falls, his fall isn't really a fall. It's the fall in comparison to the level to the stability that he had before. But in comparison to other people, he's still way beyond. Okay. Ach, ikara shel darga zo. Now, what is the essence of that level? Hanisheret belibo shel adam, that remains in the heart of man. Gam b'shat nefila, even when he's falling, b'mahalach hitkadmuto, as he's making progress. So what is it that remains there? V'novat מאהבה שנתחנך והורגל בה מנעוריו. It's emanating from the love that he was taught to have when he was a child. בטרם שהגיע למדרגת צדיק, before he got to the level of צדיק. וזה שכתוב גם כי יסכין, and that is what Shlomo HaMelech said, that even when he's going to be older, he won't forget it. הדרך של עבודת השם היא, now here's you realize he's answering the question that he asked at the very, very beginning. Were you here at the beginning of this? At the very beginning, he started with Chinuch l'na'ar al pi darko, gam ki yaskin lo yasur mimena. Educate the child in his ways so that when he'll be older, he won't depart from it. Right? Question was, what are we talking about over here? What kind of education, right? You're going to give him a childish education about God or whatever it is. So what Alter Rebbe is basically saying is, you know what the education we're talking about, the education of how to know God within. How to recognize that you have a relationship with Hashem, not just Hashem who is beyond all concepts, but Hashem who is your deepest essence within your being, right? Your soul is your deepest essence. Hashem is the deepest essence of your soul. And educating the child to know that relationship, educating the child to learn how to bring out his love for God through these meditations that we learned here in Chinuch Kattan, okay? That will stay with him throughout his life. Okay? In other words, we're not talking about a tzaddik now, okay? Or somebody who's not yet a tzaddik. And yesterday you were madly in love with God, right? And today, not so much, right? Chas v'sholem. So what you learned about how to bring out that love, it's accessible to you now too. Understand? In other words, you sit down and meditate on the meditation again, do the meditation again, and you're going to once again evoke that love. Understand? That's not going to depart from you. That stays with you throughout. Okay? So he says, הדרך של עבודת השם היא דרך מסובכת. What does מסובכת mean? Complex, complicated. The path of serving God is a complicated path. שיש בה עליות וירידות. There's ups and there's downs. What? Bottom of 28. About okay, the fourth line in that paragraph. שיש בה עליות וירידות. It has ups and it has downs. והרבה מאוד נפילות. And there's a lot of falling. ואם אין לאדם בסיס טוב מתחילה, and if the person doesn't have a good basis to begin with, יש לחשוש שהמשבר בנקודת המעבר, so then there's reason to worry that the crisis of the transition point, הנפילה שישנה בין דרגה לדרגה, the fall that is there between one level and the next level, תהיה נפילה גמורה, that it might end up being a complete fall. אמנם, however, כפי שנאמר, as was said, דרגה שאדם עמל להגיע אליה, a level that a person worked to achieve, משאירה רושם בנפשו, it leaves an imprint in your being, in your psyche, Gam kishu nofel mimena, even when you fall from it. So let's take a look at this. Maybe you can help me. My son Netzach used to go to the cheder, and when we'd call the school, the secretary would answer and she'd say, "Hello, can you help us?" Yeah, it was cute. Okay, let's see, help me out. You speak to a lot of people there in Tzfat and here at Heritage House and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine that along the way you've met people who had become Bali Tshuva and then they dropped it. You've met some people like that, right? You've met people that grew up from and then they, so to speak, went off the derech, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Why? Why did they go off the derech? Why did the Baal Tshuva stop being observant?
I think for a lot of them,
Speak up.
I think, there's a couple of reasons. One big reason I see is that sometimes the learning that they received and then the way that it was given to them was not, it wasn't good for that. Like it wasn't, either they came from unhealthy situations or they were taught something in a way that was just like forced on them. It wasn't for their soul necessarily. All learning is for their soul, but it wasn't for them. Like they weren't able to integrate.
It didn't speak to them. Yeah.
They didn't speak to them, so they had.
Okay, that's one possibility. Yeah. Another, for example, okay, I remember this young man, but he had come here, he became religious, he got married, and had some children, and divorced and left. Okay. And when I was talking with him, it turns out that he came from a lousy home. Okay. He came here, he saw nice communities with nice families, okay? And he had his problems. And he thought that by joining the community, his problems would be resolved, okay? But what did he discover? That the problems that he still had to work out, right? Okay. In other words, or he thought that now that he's going to be, I remember one guy in Montreal came to our house, like he had been to Aish. He was like really, really religious. And he had been, before he became religious, he had been in transcendental meditation. He was a teacher in it. And now he was telling me about how Shema Yisrael, saying Shema Yisrael is way more powerful than anything in TM, and so on and so on. And then a few months later, I saw him, and no kippah, no nothing. He dropped everything. So we're talking, and he said, basically what happened was that his mother was very sick, and he had thought that if he's going to become Shomer Shabbos and be religious, that would bring his mother healing. But in the meantime, it didn't. So he was angry at God and he dropped it. Okay? Now, I'm not judging him, for sure not, right? We're not talking about that. But let's think about it for a second. So basically, his vision of God, or his relationship with God was, God, you're out there. You're beyond. And when things are good, I love you. When things are not good, it's not so good, right? The relationship isn't so good. Now, question is, so what's the problem? The problem is that he never developed a relationship with Hashem from within himself.
Right.
That's what's
what I
being
was
said
saying.
over here.
Right.
He doesn't have a relationship with Hashem from within himself. That's what happened to a lot of people after the Holocaust. They never got to experience a close relationship with Hashem within themselves, and therefore the relationship was like, to them, was a contractual one. I do this and this and this, and you, God, have to provide me and take care of me. Came to Holocaust, they didn't have the provision, they didn't have the care, so their relationship with Hashem, so to speak, went out the window, okay? Went up in smoke, literally. I am in the middle of giving a class. Call me in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Okay, now, what about people who did have a relationship with God from within? And what happened with them after the Holocaust or during the Holocaust? So there are those who were really angry at God, and they said, I'm not fasting on Yom Kippur, and I'm not doing any mitzvahs. But they didn't stop believing in God. They were saying, I know you're there, and I'm angry at you, and for now, I'm not doing any of the things that you want me to do. But their knowledge, their relationship with Hashem was still there. Understand? And that is the result of the reshimu, the result of the impression that was left from that relationship that they had attained. Okay? So a relationship that you work at and you achieve, even when there's a falling afterwards, okay, it's not a complete fall, it's not over. You ever met anybody who didn't have an argument with his wife or didn't have an argument with her husband? Right? Or two good friends you ever met that never had an argument? So they have a big argument. If that's the end of their relationship, what that means is that it was superficial to begin with. Right? It was superficial to begin with. Right? But if it wasn't superficial, they're going to forgive each other. They're going to understand. They're going to make up. They're going to get back together again, because something deep had been achieved, and that's what he's saying over here. ואולם רושם זה אינו בהכרח דרגה, and in the yellow I just turned the page. אינו בהכרח, one second, ואינו בהכרח דרגה שאדם נמצא בה בפועל. Now that impression that you have there, that imprint rather, maybe is a bit stronger of a word. You might not be there right now. You understand? Maybe right now it's like, like the person is angry at the other person, and it doesn't even want to think about the fact that they've got this bond. Okay? And they want to ignore it. And they want to be angry right now. But the imprint of the bond that they had is still there. It's still there.
You're saying even if they're not, and what if, I know two people who had a really big argument and they really don't talk at all anymore. For them, the argument was, it was like they all of a sudden saw something in the other person they had never seen before. And they're like, this is not somebody I want to be close to. And they had been friends for years, but they didn't know this about this person. and it came out in like a heated thing, and it was just like, so I'm just comparing it to this concept.
So it's a good question. Okay. Sie fragt eine gute Kasche. Rabbi, die redet Jiddisch, ja? Ein bisschen. Aber sie redet nicht kein Jiddisch. Sie redet Jiddisch? No.
I wish.
Okay. So, you can sie verkaufen.
I understood what that meant.
What does that mean?
What
What did that mean? What did that mean? We can sell you. You wouldn't know it.
You translate it not the way it's saying, but it's an idiom.
What it means?
It just means like, you know, in other words, if you don't know the language, like, you know, somebody can really dray you a cup. Okay.
In English,
So you're asking a question. Let's go back to the question.
Right. Okay. I knew that you were speaking.
No, we were just kidding. So you're asking a good question. Okay. I'm friends with somebody and good friends with them. And then something comes up in a relationship, or not necessarily directly between us, but and I see a character trait and this person that I don't really like. I really don't like. And I don't want to be friends with them anymore. Okay? So the question is, no.
Was it really superficial to begin with?
Was the relationship superficial until now?
I mean,
Or, in other words, the fact that I don't want to be friends with them anymore, does it mean that the relationship was superficial? So let's put it this way. What if I'm angry then? Is the relationship superficial?
no, if you have the ability to be angry at someone.
If I'm angry, if I hate them now, that means that the relationship is not superficial, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's like this. Let's say I don't want to be friends with them right now because I really don't like what they're doing. Okay? Can I go back and recall the times that we were good friends? I can, right? In other words, I can sit there and daydream, so to speak, and think about when we went horse riding. But I can, right? In other words, the memories are there, right? The memories are there. The imprints of all those good times, all those times of friendship, are there. They're still there. It wasn't superficial. There's some new information that's making me decide that, you know what, I don't really want to continue this. Okay? But it's still there. Okay. The fact that I have to even actually make a decision to say I don't want to continue is because it's there. Because the relationship is there. If it wouldn't be there, it would just, okay, I saw that, I saw something that I don't appreciate. Okay, goodbye. I don't even think about it anymore. Okay? So, yeah.
No, I agree with that. It was just that the statement was made, if you end a relationship, then it means it wasn't.
No. So that's what I'm saying. If it ends because of something like superficial, that means the relationship was superficial. Right? Now, משום כך צריך שיהיה לאדם עיקר בנפשו, so therefore it's necessary that the main thing that you need to possess is basis mutzak, a solid base, שאינו ניתן יותר לדיון ולפקפוק. You need to have a solid base in the relationship that cannot be questioned or undone מדרגה שעליה האדם אינו דן יותר משום שהיא חלק מהעיצוב היסודי של מהות נפשו. It's an aspect of your being that you no longer are judging or questioning whether this is me or whether this isn't me, or whether this exists in me or doesn't, because it's already clear that it's become part of me. Okay? If you question today, do I believe in God, do I not believe in God? And yesterday you believed in God, but today you're questioning, do I believe in God, do I not believe in God? Right? So that means that yesterday's believing in God wasn't really all that deep. It hadn't become yet a part of my reality. Right? It needs to become a part of my reality. And that's the education that we've got to give to the child. גם כשאדם עובר מדרגה לדרגה, הוא אינו משנה את כל מהותו. Even when you're going from one level to another level, you don't change your whole essence. יש דברים בנפש שהם קניינים קבועים. There are things in your psyche that are permanent acquisitions. קנייני הנער שלפני דרכו, שהוא הולך מדרגה לדרגה בעבודת השם, things that the youth acquired in his journey of service of God, as he's going from level to level, the relationship that he acquired in his youth, שגם כי יסכין, is such that even when he's going to be older, וגם אם ייפול מאותן דרגות, and even if he's going to fall from those levels, מאותן דרגות גבוהות, from those high levels, לא יסור ממנה, he will not depart from it. הנער צריך לגדול. The child has to grow up. הוא צריך להגיע לדרגות גבוהות יותר. He has to get to higher levels. המושגים שהיו לו בילדותו, the concepts that he had in his childhood, אינם מספיקים ואסור שיהיו מספיקים לו. Those concepts that he was given when he was a child, they're not enough, and God forbid that those childish ways of understanding should be enough. וכדי שהוא יוכל להתקדם ולהסתכן באורחות חיים, but in order that he should be able to make progress and take risks in the paths of life, באורחות צדיקים, in the paths of the righteous, צריך שיהיה בנפשו בסיס יציב, he has to have a solid basis in his psyche. שממנו אין נופלים, he has to have a basis from which he can't fall. רק לאחר שיסוד זה נבנה כראוי, only once this foundation is built properly, רק לאחר החינוך הקטן, only after the what's the reader here? Sorry. רק לאחר שיסוד זה נבנה כראוי, רק לאחר החינוך קטן. Only after this foundation has been built properly, after the education of the child. לימוד שיטתי ומבוסס היטב שיקנה לאדם דרגות ראשוניות ובסיסיות של הכרה. The learning, the structured and well-founded learning with which a person acquires these primal levels and basic levels shel hakara, of awareness of God, vagasha, and an emotionally involved relationship. Shetisha'alna kvuot b'libo le'olam. Only after you've developed such a relationship that it's clear that this is going to be the same, this is going to be there forever, then you can go ahead further and without worrying too much about the risks. Okay? So I'm going to save the last couple of paragraphs for Sunday and Monday, and Ms. Hashem, and the last class on this is going to be on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, Rabbi Yoner Rothman is going to continue for a while I'm away, and he's going to be learning Rabbi Shlomo on Chanukah from the Sefer. Well, it's not Chanukah already. We've got another 6.5 weeks, but it's going to go fast. Time flies, right?
It was only yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a very memorable Hanukkah for me.
Huh?
My Hanukkah last year was very memorable. So I'm really
Yeah. Baruch Hashem.
still feeling the reverberation of it.
Okay, so this Chinuch Kattan is extremely important in our lives. And if you didn't get it as a child, then you got to do it now. Understand? You got to we've got to take time to meditate deeply on these meditations so that they become a part of our basic identity. That's what needs to be done. One of the explanations in the opening verse of this week's parsha, Hashem says, Lech lecho mi'artzecho mi'moladetcho mi'beit avicha, leave your country, leave your birthplace, leave the house of your father. And geographically speaking, does that make sense? It should be the other way around. Leave your father's home, leave your city, leave your country, right? If I'm going from here, if I'm going from Montreal to Eretz Yisrael, so first I leave my home, then I leave Montreal, then I leave the country behind. So how come over here the Torah says it in reverse order? Because so one of the Meforshim says, do you know the answer to this? No?
One thing I haven't done 21 times.
What?
Every time you learn something, it's different.
The answer is, we're not talking about geography here. We're talking about Hashem says to Abraham to drop the things that he's learned from his country, from his city, from his birthplace, from the house of his father. Which is the easiest to shed, your Canadian habits or your Toronto habits? Your Canadian habits, those are the easiest to shed.
No, it's not.
I'm just giving you an example. In other words, what's happening in your country, it relates to you, you relate to it, but not as much as what's happening in your city. The things that you learn in your city are far more significant than what's happening in Vancouver.
That's true.
The things that you learned in your city are not nearly as real or as implanted in your being as the things that you've learned from your family. Okay? So Hashem says, Avram, lech lecho mi'artzecho, you've got to leave your country. And then who is it that says? And then more difficult is to shed the things that you picked up in your city, in your birthplace. And more difficult is the things to shed that you picked up in your father's house. So it's stage by stage, understand?
Mm-hmm.
And Hashem is saying to Avraham Avinu, we have to unlearn these things. Just like it's possible to learn, it's also possible to unlearn.
So we're not talking physical leadiness. We're not talking about spiritual and emotional leadiness. Is that what it means?
So it's one of the meanings here.
Don't they say in English you can take the person out of the culture, but you can't take the culture out of the person? I still remember, and I don't do it all the time. I remember the way that I behave is from my culture. I don't behave the same way a person from a different country does.
Of course not. Right. If you go stand at Ben Gurion Airport and watch the people coming into the hall from different, you can see the difference between one country and another country. There's no question about it. The Gemara says, Avir Poel, the air that you breathe has an effect on you.
One time I asked my sister a couple of years ago, she was here not quite 30 years, and I asked her, how long do you have to be here before you get used to the culture? And she says, you don't. I still cannot go on a bus and push people outside.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I realizing lately I really become Israeli. I mean, I'm still American.
Yeah, and you're pushing people around.
No, that I was always good. No, there's really things that the culture around. So
Yeah, you with time you pick up certain things. Like for example, I noticed I don't say please as often as I used to.
Mm.
Right, I don't do it. I haven't thought of it.
Right?
I still say please.
Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
There's going to be a...
Shabbos Shabbos. Yeah.
Okay.
And Ephraim Mordechai is one of the sponsors this week. So you'll come in and give him